Welcome to the Oshkosh Police Department's virtual awards ceremony. I would like to begin our ceremony by thanking each and every member of the Oshkosh Police Department, as well as their families, for your dedication to service to our community. I also need to thank our community members who have stepped up and filled the gap when our officers were not available and helped out their fellow community members. I thank you for all of your efforts, all the hard work that you've put into the past difficult year. Today we are celebrating the dedication and hard work of so many. Your work in 2020 has shined over and over again. Your dedication and commitment deserves to be recognized. Although we are not meeting in person together to celebrate and honor you, we are here today to virtually recognize each of you. Thank you for all the work that you have done and continue to do in these trying times that we live in.
Hello, I'm Captain Becky Kaiser, Administrative Captain for the Oshkosh Police Department. For this 2020 virtual awards ceremony, I will be presenting the Citizen Awards. In 2020, there were 17 Citizen Award recipients. A Citizen Award is given to those who perform or act in a manner that fit the criteria for other officer awards. These citizens are typically nominated by officers who recognize their actions while on a call with these citizens. The following honorees have agreed to allow us to publicly recognize them during this virtual awards ceremony. Antonio Rivera. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to present Antonio Rivera with a Citizen Award for his assistance to the Oshkosh Police Department. On March 26, 2020, officers responded to the Fairway Apartments to investigate a report of a knife and blood being found outside of an apartment building. Mr. Rivera is employed there as a maintenance worker, and he provided access to an apartment which proved not to be involved. Officers continued to canvass the area, and upon contacting some tenants who did not speak English, Mr. Rivera provided Spanish translation for them. Initially, it appeared as though the tenants were not involved, but Mr. Rivera alerted officers that the tenants may know more than they let on. Mr. Rivera persuaded the tenants to be honest, and they explained their involvement to the officers, allowing the matter to be properly investigated and closed safely. In recognition for Antonio Rivera's valuable assistance to the police officers on scene, it gives me great pleasure to present him with the Oshkosh Police Department Citizens Award. James and Dana Cook. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to present James and Dana Cook with a Citizen Award for their assistance to the Oshkosh community. On April 30th, 2020, an elderly male with Alzheimer's was reported missing after he left for a bike ride 3.5 hours earlier and failed to return home. As officers searched for the male, they were advised that James and Dana Cook had located him on their front porch after he knocked on their door for directions. By this time, the male had biked for 14 miles and was still 2.2 miles from his home. James and Dana recognized that the male looked confused, and they asked for his phone number so they could contact his family. Dana then called his wife and told her he had been located. James waited with him on the porch until officers arrived and facilitated him being reunited with his wife. In recognition for their actions and for the care and compassion they showed to someone in need, it gives me great pleasure to present James and Dana Cook with the Oshkosh Police Department Citizens Award. Rodney Frazier. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to present Rodney Frazier with a Citizen Award for his continued support of the Oshkosh Police Department and its officers and other employees. Over the summer months of 2020, the Oshkosh Police Department scheduled diversity and inclusion training sessions, and Mr. Frazier volunteered his time to prepare numerous and, might I add, delicious meals and provide them to our employees during this training. He has also volunteered to grill brats and burgers at Festival Foods to raise several $100s that he donated to our Community Closet program, supporting our outreach to families in need. His generosity and support have been especially welcome as law enforcement everywhere focuses more on race relations and social justice. To this day, Rodney continues to be a pillar of support to the Oshkosh community, providing free, delicious meals to those in need. Mr. Frazier's actions have made a positive difference in this community. It gives me great pleasure to present Rodney Frazier with the Oshkosh Police Department Citizens Award for his continued support and community outreach. Alyssa Abrams and Joshua Bickle. On December 18, 2020, Alyssa and Joshua and two other individuals entered Sandarella's bridal to look around when they came across the only worker inside, who was unresponsive and tipped back on the ground from her chair. They immediately recognized she likely had a seizure. She was foaming and bleeding from the mouth and not moving. They used their knowledge they have and are currently learning through their nursing and medical schooling and started checking her pulse and respirations. They rolled her onto her side and secured her head prior to calling 911 and remained by her side until help arrived. If it weren't for their immediate actions, the outcome could have been drastically different. It gives me great pleasure to present Alyssa Abrams and Joshua Bickle with the Oshkosh Police Department Citizens Award for the assistance they rendered that day. Alacia Pettis. Alacia became aware of repeated sexual assaults towards two minor females that were known to her. She took initiative by collecting DNA and audio evidence. She was also able to get the male to admit some of the sexual assaults on a recorded video. With that, Alacia then assisted the girls in reporting this to the police and stayed by their side for support the entire time. Her assistance provided significant evidence and resulted in the arrest of the perpetrator and the safety for the victims. Ms. Pettis' investigative actions saved these girls from future harm, and she took action that not all others normally would. It gives me great pleasure to present Alacia Pettis with the Oshkosh Police Department Citizens Award for the assistance that she rendered. Roberto Campos. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to present Roberto Campos with a Citizen Award for his life-saving efforts for two individuals in the Fox River. On December 19, 2020, Mr. Campos was leaving for work at East Bay when he heard screams for help. He investigated and located two individuals in the partially frozen Fox River who were in distress. Mr. Campos immediately called 911 and assisted in attempts to rescue victims from the water. The 58-year-old female victim later succumbed to her injuries and passed away. But the 60-year-old male victim survived largely because of Mr. Campos's quick actions. Mr. Campos was deeply affected by this event and still thinks of the male and his family to this day and hopes that they are okay. Undoubtedly, Mr. Campos's quick actions gave the male victim his best chance for survival. It gives me great pleasure to present Roberto Campos with the Oshkosh Police Department Award for the assistance he rendered. Our final Citizen Award will be for Joseph Solomon. On May 16, 2020, Mr. Solomon was driving in the area of Washburn Street and Witzel Avenue when he observed a vehicle stopped in the roundabout with the driver slumped over the wheel. He immediately stopped to render aid, assisted by another citizen. Together, they moved the 71-year-old male from the vehicle onto the roadway. Mr. Solomon then took control of the situation and, using his paramedic training, performed CPR. When the fire department personnel arrived, Mr. Solomon gave them an accurate assessment of his condition so that they could take over. A pulse was regained and the subject was then transported to the hospital. In recognition for his decisive actions and for the care and compassion he showed to a stranger in need, it gives me great pleasure to present Joseph Solomon with the Oshkosh Police Department Citizens Award. As I mentioned earlier, there were 17 individuals that received citizen awards. We sincerely appreciate the assistance given to the Oshkosh Police Department by our citizens and continue to look forward to recognizing the heroic efforts of our citizens every day. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Assistant Chief Kurt Shaney, and I'm here to read the Employee Awards definitions and also to present the first quarter awards. Employee awards. The following are definitions for the various types of awards to be given to employees during this ceremony. Noteworthy performance of duty. This is for the performance of duty considered commendable and worthy of praise, but does not rise to the level of any of the other award categories. Any police officer, auxiliary officer, or civilian employee may be cited for noteworthy performance of duty upon written recommendation of any person inside or outside the department and approved by the Chief of Police. Department Commendation. This award is given to a police officer, auxiliary officer, or civilian who has accomplished outstanding and/or meritorious achievements. The act may be a single act or a series of events in which the employee or civilian distinguishes himself or herself in an emergency or non-emergency conditions. Life-Saving Award. This award is presented to a police officer, auxiliary officer, or civilian employee who is directly responsible for saving a human life or substantially prolonging a human life. Officers who receive this award will automatically be eligible for consideration for Officer of the Quarter and/or Officer of the Year. Service Award. Members who have served a minimum of 10 years in good standing on the listed special teams are eligible to receive this award at the conclusion of their service to the specialty team. The teams include Honor Guard, Mobile Field Force, SWAT, Crash Team, Crisis Negotiator, Unmanned Aerial System, Field Training Officer, and K-9. Police Officer of the Quarter. This award is presented to a police officer for his or her superior performance in the line of duty by virtue of a single incident or over a period of time within a 3-month period. This designation reflects a commitment to duty, this department, and the community, and performance above and beyond that of the officer's peers. The quarter shall be designated as January through March, April through June, July through September, and October through December. The 4 officers chosen as officers of the quarter shall be considered as candidates for Officer of the Year. Police Officer of the Year. This award is presented to a police officer for his or her superior performance in the line of duty by virtue of a single incident or over a period of time within 1 calendar year. This designation reflects a commitment to duty, this department, and the community, and performance above and beyond that of the officer's peers. The 4 officers chosen as officers of the quarter shall be considered as candidates for Officer of the Year. Supervisor of the Year. This award is presented to a sworn or non-sworn supervisor for his or her superior performance in the line of duty. This designation shall reflect the dedicated efforts required to lead his or her personnel to an understanding and willing application of the department's mission, goals, and objectives. The supervisor selected must also demonstrate leadership qualities that promote team building, enhance team performance, and professional growth of the individual employee. This supervisor shall demonstrate, through his or her performance, a commitment to the community and improvement in department functioning. Team Policing Officer of the Year. This award may be issued annually to an officer or officers who embrace the team policing philosophy and demonstrate they are community-oriented, problem-solving focused, and data-driven. While taking ownership in a reporting area neighborhood, proactively identifying and solving problems, forming partnerships with community stakeholders, coordinating with team officers, and taking follow-up measures with a positive outcome. Civilian of the Year. This award is presented to one non-sworn civilian employee and reflects demonstrated proficiency in the applicable employee's position, above and beyond that of the employee's peers. It also reflects their superior performance in areas of professionalism and commitment to the duty of their position, the department, and the community. Eligible personnel for this award include all non-sworn civilian support positions. First Quarter Awards 2020. Noteworthy Performance and Police Officer of the Quarter, Officer Andrew PAUER. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to recognize Officer Andrew PAUER for his noteworthy performance of duty and award him Police Officer of the Quarter for the first quarter of 2020. On January 16, 2020, Officer PAUER observed a vehicle driven by a subject who was facing charges after fleeing from him the previous night. When he attempted to stop the vehicle, it rammed his squad and took off at a high rate of speed. Officer PAUER was granted supervisory approval to pursue the vehicle. During the entire time, he maintained his composure and communicated with dispatch and other officers, driving with due regard and broadcasting updates on his speed and traffic conditions. Ultimately, he coordinated an effective box-in maneuver that ended the pursuit, and the subject was taken into custody without injury to anyone involved. For his professional conduct in a stressful situation, it gives me great pleasure to recognize Officer Andrew PAUER for noteworthy performance of duty and award him Police Officer of the Quarter. His actions are to be commended and are consistent with the mission, vision, and values of the Oshkosh Police Department. Congratulations, Officer PAUER. Noteworthy performance of duty, Winnebago County Sheriff's Office Dispatcher Kyle NACHMAN. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to recognize Winnebago County Sheriff's Office Dispatcher Kyle NACHMAN for noteworthy performance of duty. On January 16, 2020, Officer Andrew PAUER initiated a vehicle pursuit after the vehicle rammed his squad and took off at a high rate of speed. Dispatcher Kyle NACHMAN was assigned to work the city frequency that night, and he calmly managed all radio transmissions during the pursuit. Dispatcher NACHMAN assisted by giving map updates as officers left the city limits, and he coordinated the response of assisting officers from other agencies. Throughout his transmissions, he remained calm and composed, making it easier for the officers to focus on the task at hand. The pursuit ended after stop sticks were deployed and a boxing-in maneuver was used, allowing officers to safely take the driver into custody. For his professional conduct in a stressful situation, it gives me great pleasure to recognize Winnebago County Sheriff's Office Dispatcher Kyle NACHMAN for noteworthy performance of duty. His actions are to be commended and are consistent with the mission, the vision, and the values of the Oshkosh Police Department. Noteworthy performance of duty, Officer Keith Nurkowski and Officer Michael Hendrickson. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to recognize Officer Keith Nurkowski and Officer Michael Hendrickson for their noteworthy performance of duty. On March 30th, 2020, officers responded to a call of a subject with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to his head who was still breathing. Officer Hendrickson was one of the first officers on scene, and he applied direct pressure on the subject's wound while paramedics performed other life-saving measures. Officer Keith Nurkowski assisted paramedics in carrying the subject downstairs to the ambulance, and both officers accompanied the subject while he was transported to Theta Clark Medical Center in Neenah. During the transport, Officer Hendrickson continued applying pressure to the subject's wound, while Officer Nurkowski assisted in applying oxygen to his lungs. Because of their dedication and teamwork, the subject's life was prolonged so that his family could see him one last time and organ procurement could be arranged. It gives me great pleasure to recognize Officer Keith Nurkowski and Officer Michael Hendrickson for their noteworthy performance of duty. Their actions are to be commended and are consistent with the mission, vision, and values of the Oshkosh Police Department. Congratulations, Officers Keith Nurkowski and Michael Hendrickson.
My name is Captain Kevin Konrad with the Oshkosh Police Department. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to recognize Officer Scott SOPATA with a Department Commendation and award him Police Officer of the Quarter for the second quarter of 2020. On May 26, 2020, officers responded to the 3,300 block of Logan Drive to check the welfare of a male contemplating suicide. The man also mentioned suicide by cop. Upon arrival, officers found the subject's vehicle parked in the lot with an empty rifle case inside. Believing he had entered his ex-wife's apartment, they set a perimeter around the building, only to observe him a short time later approaching from an open field carrying the rifle. The subject entered his vehicle, and then Officer SOPATA, a trained crisis negotiator, called the man's cell phone, which had been left inside the vehicle. Officer SOPATA was able to establish a rapport, showed empathy, utilized active listening skills, and after 45 minutes of negotiations, convinced him to exit the vehicle unarmed and be taken into custody safely. Through Officer SOPATA's compassion, patience, and skill, this volatile matter was resolved peacefully. It gives me great pleasure to present Officer Scott SOPATA with the Department Commendation Award and to recognize him as Police Officer of the Quarter. His actions are to be commended and are consistent with the mission, vision, and values of the Oshkosh Police Department. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to recognize Sergeant Jeff Nelson with a Department Commendation. Sergeant Nelson is the team leader of our mobile field force. Beginning May 31st, 2020, and lasting through the second quarter of the year, he led the department's response to several protests that occurred in Oshkosh as a result of the George Floyd death in Minneapolis. Based off intelligence provided by crime analyst TORI HEIDEMANN, Sergeant Nelson worked with protest organizers, often on short notice, to plan a response that would allow their First Amendment speech while protecting the safety of protesters and public citizens. Sergeant Nelson exhibited exceptional judgment and communication with everyone before, during, and after these events to help them end peacefully. For his dedication and leadership in a tense social climate, it gives me great pleasure to present Sergeant Jeff Nelson with the Department Commendation Award. His actions are to be commended and are consistent with the mission, vision, and values of the Oshkosh Police Department. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to recognize crime analyst TORI HEIDEMANN with a Department Commendation. Beginning May 31st, 2020, and lasting through the second quarter of the year, the city of Oshkosh experienced several protests as a result of George Floyd's death in Minneapolis. Working closely with Jeff Nelson, team leader of our mobile field force, crime analyst HEIDEMANN monitored social media platforms and communicated with surrounding agencies to determine the date, time, location, attendance, and safety concerns for each protest. She made herself available after hours to research additional information and responded on short notice to be present during the protest. The intelligence she provided was instrumental in our planned response and ability to keep the protests peaceful. For her dedication and teamwork in a tense social climate, it gives me great pleasure to present crime analyst TORI HEIDEMANN with the Department Commendation Award. Her actions are to be commended and are consistent with the mission, vision, and values of the Oshkosh Police Department. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud to present Officer Grant Wilson and Officer Michael Hendrickson with the LIFESAVING Award. On May 2nd, 2020, Officers Grant Wilson and Michael Hendrickson responded to the 1000 block of Wisconsin Street for a 50-year-old male who was unconscious and not breathing. Assisted by Sergeant Mike Hodder, the officers administered CPR, with Officer Wilson giving chest compressions, while Officer Hendrickson connected the AED, with no shock advised once it was connected. Suspecting drug use, Officer Hendrickson administered Narcan, but it had no effect. Officers continued CPR for approximately 5 minutes until paramedics arrived and took over advanced life care. The subject eventually regained a pulse and was transported to the hospital. Although he later died, the officers' efforts prolonged his life, giving family members time to say their goodbyes and put his affairs in order. The exhaustive effort and teamwork shown by Officers Grant Wilson and Michael Hendrickson allowed them to provide the subject with the help he needed until paramedics arrived. There is no doubt that their actions prolonged a human life. It gives me great pleasure to present Officers Grant Wilson and Michael Hendrickson with the Life-Saving Award. Their actions are commended and they are consistent with the mission, vision, and values of the Oshkosh Police Department. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to recognize Lieutenant Michael Hodder for his noteworthy performance of duty. On June 12, 2020, Lieutenant Hodder, a trained crisis negotiator, responded to 530 North Main Street with numerous other officers, where he took on the role as negotiator while speaking with a person in crisis. Lieutenant Hodder realized that he had the best vantage point to speak to the subject, as he was the closest to him, speaking from an open window. Lieutenant Hodder realized that the subject could easily slip and fall from the ledge he was standing on, as it was raining heavily and there was a substantial wind, making the situation even more serious. Lieutenant Hodder made verbal contact with the subject and was able to keep his attention even though the subject was easily distracted from other things going on around him. Lieutenant Hodder was able to get the subject to trust him and eventually get him calmed down enough to focus on coming back into the building from the ledge. Lieutenant Hodder was able to place himself in a spot from inside the window where he could grab the subject's hand and assist him in through the window to safety. It gives me great pleasure to recognize Lieutenant Michael Hodder for noteworthy performance of his duty. His actions are to be commended and are consistent with the mission, vision, and values of the Oshkosh Police Department. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to recognize Sergeant Brandon Ansell, Detective Jeremy Wilson, Officer Scott SOPATA, and Officer Michael Hendrickson for their noteworthy performance of duty. On May 22, 2020, Officers Hendrickson and SOPATA responded to 916 Mason Street to investigate a welfare check of a female. While speaking with the female, she stated that her husband may have died a short time ago. Officers then went to check the welfare of her husband and established that he had been deceased for quite some time. The home was in deplorable condition, to include an infestation of cockroaches and other bugs, fecal matter, and rotting garbage, requiring officers to wear protective equipment to enter the residence. The following day, Sergeant Ansell and Detective Wilson worked alongside two members of the Oshkosh Fire Department in removing the body, which was partially mummified. As part of their investigation, they also conducted a full search of the residence to determine there was nothing else suspicious inside. Sergeant Ansell provided leadership while he and Detective Wilson, Officer SOPATA, and Officer Hendrickson conducted themselves in a confident, self-assured manner, despite proceeding into a residence unlike anything they have ever seen. It gives me great pleasure to recognize them with a noteworthy performance of duty. Their actions are to be commended and are consistent with the mission, vision, and values of the Oshkosh Police Department. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to recognize Lieutenant Brian SCHULDES for his noteworthy performance of duty. On June 3, 2020, officers were dispatched to 1105 Jefferson Street for a disturbance in which a subject, who possibly had a knife, was destroying property and was suspected to be on methamphetamines. Officers arrived on scene and believed that the male might be in a state of excited delirium. Lieutenant SCHULDES, a trained crisis negotiator, responded and assisted with both cell phone and in-person negotiations. The negotiations started and stopped numerous times over the course of roughly 40 minutes. Lieutenant SCHULDES was able to successfully de-escalate the situation, which resulted with the subject complying and being assisted in obtaining medical treatment. It gives me great pleasure to recognize Lieutenant Brian SCHULDES for noteworthy performance of his duty. His actions are to be commended and are consistent with the mission, vision, and values of the Oshkosh Police Department. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to recognize Officer Thomas KOPCZYK for his noteworthy performance of duty. Over the last 6 months, Officer KOPCZYK has volunteered his time to work on various projects throughout the department. These projects include designing a new winter patrol hat and coordinating a fundraiser for the Oshkosh Police Department Mental Health and Resiliency Initiative. The fundraiser brought in $420. He also participated in all meetings and was an integral part of the Oshkosh Police Department fitness room redesign. In addition, Officer KOPCZYK is responsible for integrating the Oshkosh Police Department camera registration program. He did all of the research on this project and went out of his way to contact other departments in and out of the state to see how they are running their program and how we could make it a reality here at the Oshkosh Police Department. Officer KOPCZYK is an outside-the-box type of thinker and has innovative ideas that he has helped bring to fruition at the Oshkosh Police Department. It gives me great pleasure to recognize Officer Thomas KOPCZYK for noteworthy performance of duty. His actions are to be commended and are consistent with the mission, vision, and values of the Oshkosh Police Department. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud to present Officer Ryan BOERNER with the Service Award. Officer BOERNER served in good standing as a member of the SWAT team for 15 years. His commitment to the team began in January 2005 and continued until his resignation in April 2020. During his tenure, he served as an operator, equipment officer, and assistant team leader. As a department instructor, he also led training for the team in his areas of expertise. Officer BOERNER selflessly sacrificed his time, energy, and personal life for the needs of the department and the team. He was a valued and respected member of the team and always upheld the values of this department. It gives me great pleasure to present Officer Ryan BOERNER with the Service Award. His actions are to be commended and are consistent with the mission, vision, and values of the Oshkosh Police Department. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to recognize Officer Andy PAUER for his noteworthy performance of duty and award him Police Officer of the Quarter for the third quarter of 2020. On August 4, 2020, officers responded to the 1700 block of Minnesota Street after receiving a 911 call that 3 people had been shot. Officer PAUER was one of the first to arrive, and he immediately coordinated the arrival of additional officers, accounting for tactical considerations. He then formed an entry team to clear the residence for other injured parties and to attempt to locate the suspect. Officer PAUER directed a team of officers to perform these tasks quickly, efficiently, and safely, allowing them to attend to secure the property, attend to injured persons, preserve evidence, and search for the suspect. Officer PAUER's calm, decisive actions led to a timely release of information and preservation of life and evidence, resulting in the suspect being arrested later the same night. It gives me great pleasure to recognize Officer Andy PAUER for noteworthy performance of duty and award him Police Officer of the Quarter. His actions are to be commended and are consistent with the mission, vision, and values of the Oshkosh Police Department. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to recognize Lieutenant Michael Hodder, Officer Dina Kruger, and Officer Scott SOPATA for their noteworthy performance of duty. On September 19, 2020, a homicide involving a firearm took place at 1723 Taft Avenue. Officers located a deceased male in the hallway of the apartment building and eventually pinpointed the location of the suspect in an apartment on the first floor of the unit. The SWAT team, along with the crisis negotiation team, were activated. Officer Scott SOPATA was the first negotiator to make contact with the suspect. He spoke with the suspect for approximately 1 hour. Officer SOPATA was able to calm him down and gather information from him about what had occurred and where the gun was located. Officer Dina Kruger was transitioned to phone contact with the suspect after she had spent time with the SWAT team trying to establish contact at the apartment building. Officer Kruger spoke with the suspect for over 2 hours, continuing to calm him and gather important details about what happened. Lieutenant Michael Hodder was initially the coach for the negotiators on the phone. He transitioned to phone contact with the suspect and convinced him to surrender and come out of his apartment. The total time for phone negotiations was just over 4 hours. Officer Scott SOPATA, Officer Dina Kruger, and Lieutenant Michael Hodder displayed professionalism, patience, and teamwork, resulting in the successful and safe resolution of a standoff after a homicide. It gives me great pleasure to recognize them for their negotiation skills with this noteworthy performance of duty. Their actions are to be commended and are consistent with the mission, vision, and values of the Oshkosh Police Department. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud to present Lieutenant Andy Lecker with the Service Award. Lieutenant Lecker served in good standing as a member of the SWAT team for 13 years. His commitment to the team began in June 2007 and continued until his voluntary resignation in August 2020 so that others could serve. During his tenure, he started out as an operator and worked his way up to team leader, successfully resolving several incidents with barricaded subjects, serving high-risk warrants, and working numerous security details along the way. Lieutenant Lecker selflessly sacrificed his time, energy, and personal life for the needs of the department and the team. He was a valued and respected leader of the team and always represented the department well. It gives me great pleasure to present Lieutenant Andy Lecker with the Service Award. His actions are to be commended and are consistent with the mission, vision, and values of the Oshkosh Police Department.
Fourth quarter 2020 awards. Life-Saving Award, Officer Trey Johnson. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to present Officer Trey Johnson with the Life-Saving Award. On December 24, 2020, Officer Trey Johnson and Officer Jacob Rennie were dispatched to 617 West Irving Avenue for a report of an 84-year-old man in cardiac arrest. Officer Johnson arrived on scene and found the man slumped over in a chair, not conscious, not breathing, and without a pulse. Officer Johnson moved the man onto the floor and began performing CPR for approximately 3 minutes before Oshkosh Fire Department paramedics arrived and took the man to the hospital. Oshkosh Fire Department Battalion Chief Hobley noted that it was Officer Johnson's willingness to jump in and do CPR that had everything to do with this male being able to walk out of the hospital alive on December the 28th of 2020. The experience, instinct, determination, and quick thinking of Officer Johnson that day allowed him to provide the male with the help he needed until paramedics arrived. There is no doubt that the actions taken by Officer Trey Johnson on December 24th, 2020 saved a life. It gives me great pleasure to present Officer Trey Johnson with the Life-Saving Award. His actions are commended and they are consistent with the mission, vision, and values of the Oshkosh Police Department. Life-Saving Award, Officers Sarah Power, Jacob Schwartz, Ryan Scott, and Cody Rukamp. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to present Officers Sarah Power, Jacob Schwartz, Ryan Scott, and Cody Rukamp with the Life-Saving Award. On December 19th, 2020, Officer Sarah Power and Officer Jacob Schwartz were the first to respond to 2 individuals who fell into the partially frozen Fox River near their East Bay business. They discovered a 58-year-old female who was unresponsive and a 60-year-old male who was attempting to keep the female's head above water. Officer Power immediately laid down onto the moisture and ice-covered riverwalk and reached down into the water to grab the female as the male was stating he couldn't hold her up any longer. Officer Schwartz held on to Officer Power to prevent her from falling into the river. Upon Officer Ryan Scott's arrival, the 3 officers, by team effort, lifted the unresponsive female out of the water. Officer Scott began to assess the female, determining that she was not breathing, and immediately began CPR. Officer Cody Rukamp arrived on scene and utilized a throw ring flotation device to provide to the male to keep him afloat. Officer Rukamp, Officer Schwartz, and Officer Power then lifted the male out of the water to safety. The female was initially revived, but after a few hours, unfortunately, succumbed to her injuries and passed away. The instinct, determination, and quick thinking and team efforts of the officers that day provided the couple with the help they needed to get them to safety. There is no doubt that their actions taken by officers that day saved the male's life. It gives me great pleasure to present Officers Power, Schwartz, SCOP, and Root Camp with the Life Saving Award. Their actions are commended and they are consistent with the mission, vision, and values of the Oshkosh Police Department. Life Saving Award, Officer Benjamin Finhouse. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to present Officer Benjamin Finhouse with the Life Saving Award. On November 13, 2020, Officer Finhouse responded to a medical call for a 17-year-old female that was not breathing and did not have a pulse. Officer Finhouse arrived on scene and disseminated the appropriate information over the radio necessary for other responding officers to maintain the integrity of the investigation. Officer Finhouse then administered a dose of Narcan, believing that the female was potentially experiencing an opiate overdose. Officer Finhouse then initiated chest compressions until Oshkosh Fire Department personnel arrived on scene to transport the female to the hospital. Even though the initial prognosis was that the female would not recover, she began to breathe on her own again in a few days and recovered. Officer Finhouse was professional and decisive in a high-stress situation with life and death consequences. Prior to Officer Finhouse's interventions, the female was not breathing and did not have a pulse. His actions are directly responsible for saving the female's life. It gives me great pleasure to present Officer Benjamin Finhouse with the Life Saving Award. His actions are commended, and once again, they are consistent with the mission, vision, and values of the Oshkosh Police Department. Life Saving Award, Officer Miguel NUNEZ and Nathan DeFati. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to present Officer Miguel NUNEZ and Officer Nathan DeFati with the Life Saving Award. On October 2, 2020, Officer NUNEZ and Officer DeFati responded to what appeared to be an overdose. Without hesitation, officers performed life-saving measures. Officer DeFati administered Narcan on the patient. Both officers took turns performing chest compressions on the patient. It was later determined that the male was having heart issues. He was placed in ICU and recovered. The quick thinking and team effort of the officers prolonged the life of this individual. There is no doubt that the actions taken by officers that day saved the male's life. It gives me great pleasure to present Officer Miguel NUNEZ and Officer Nathan DeFati with the Life Saving Award. Life Saving Award, Officers Michael McKeown and Andrea Cole. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to present Officer Michael McKeown and Officer Andrea Cole with their Life Saving Award. On October the 14th, 2020, Officers Michael McKeown and Andrea Cole responded to a welfare check for a suicidal male that was going to jump off the bridge onto Highway 41. Officers located him clinging to the outside of the fence near the northbound lanes in traffic. Officer McKeown began dialogue with the subject, but the subject turned away from Officer McKeown and the 9th Avenue roadway and began looking down toward the ground. Believing that the male was about to jump, Officer McKeown and Officer Cole climbed onto the concrete barrier, reached over the fence, and secured the male with both hands. They were then able to get the male to walk back toward the opening of the fence while securing him with both hands over the fence. He was ultimately taken into protective custody to get the help that he needed. Officer McKeown and Officer Cole both risked their safety to prevent injury or death to the suicidal male as well as motorists traveling northbound on Highway 41. It gives me great pleasure to present Officer Michael McKeown and Officer Andrea Cole with the Life Saving Award. Service Award, Captain Kevin Konrad. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud to present Captain Kevin Konrad with the Service Award. Captain Konrad was selected to be a member of the Honor Guard in 1992 and proudly served in that role for 28 years. He attended numerous Honor Guard functions ranging from law enforcement and military funerals, parades, memorial services, posting and retrieval of colors, and the law enforcement memorial event that is held annually in Madison. Captain Konrad would often change personal plans to meet the unforeseen tragic events that would need immediate attention from the Honor Guard. His devotion to the team was displayed by the number of events he attended and participated in while on the team. He truly sets an example for others to follow. Captain Konrad was a model Honor Guard member and exemplified the high standards of the unit. It gives me great pleasure to present Captain Kevin Konrad with the Service Award. His actions are to be commended and are consistent with the mission, vision, and values of the Oshkosh Police Department. Supervisor of the Year, Sergeant Jeffrey Nelson. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to present Sergeant Jeff Nelson with the 2020 Supervisor of the Year Award. In addition to his duties as direct supervisor to detectives and school resource officers, Sergeant Nelson also commands the Mobile Field Force Unit. In a typical year, Sergeant Nelson coordinates Mobile Field Force team training and diligently staffs events such as the spring and fall pub crawls. The year 2020 threw many more different types of challenging events his way. Sergeant Nelson coordinated the department's response to at least 8 different protests that occurred in the city related to social unrest throughout the nation. In addition, Sergeant Nelson's Mobile Field Force team played a major role in containing any problems during a campaign visit from President Donald Trump. Sergeant Nelson also guided his team through mutual aid requests in Kenosha. Throughout all of these events, Sergeant Nelson demonstrated exceptional communication skills with the organizers of the various protests, and there were no negative outcomes. Throughout his career, Sergeant Nelson has demonstrated leadership qualities that promote team building, enhance team performance, and professional growth of the people he supervises. He has a commitment to the community and sets an example for others to follow. It gives me great pleasure to present Sergeant Jeff Nelson with the Supervisor of the Year Award. Department Commendation, Officer of the Quarter, and Officer of the Year. Officer Dwayne Ott. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to recognize Officer Dwayne Ott with the Department Commendation, Officer of the Quarter, and Police Officer of the Year Awards. On October the 29th, 2020, Officer Ott responded to a fraud complaint from a 90-year-old female. She had fallen victim to a phone scam several days earlier. Believed that she had won a lottery, gave out some personal information, and sent some money to a scammer. Officer Ott patiently gathered the details from her, which was no doubt challenging, since the victim was confused and upset. He took her to the bank so that the staff there could secure her accounts and help investigate the stolen funds. Back at her apartment, Officer Ott took the time to make sure the victim was calmed down, and he talked to her about various scams and ways to avoid them. Since she lives alone, Officer Ott gathered contact information for some of her relatives and later contacted them via phone to explain the situation. Officer Ott went above and beyond. He was extremely helpful and has kept in touch since then to check in and make sure things are okay with her. I received a lengthy letter from the niece of the victim with an outpouring of gratitude for the manner in which Officer Ott handled the situation with her elderly aunt. There is no doubt this is not an isolated incident. Officer Ott treats people with decency, compassion, and respect. For the professionalism and community service that he provided, it gives me great pleasure to present Officer Dwayne Ott with the Department Commendation, the Police Officer of the Quarter Award, and Police Officer of the Year Award. Congratulations, Dwayne, on a job well done. Team Policing Officer of the Year, Officer Thomas Kopczyk. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to present Officer Thomas Kopczyk with the 6th Annual Team Policing Officer of the Year Award. Officer Thomas Kopczyk developed and implemented 2 different programs in 2020 that are beneficial to the community, innovative, forward-thinking, and will aid in solving crime and epitomize the meaning of our mission at the Oshkosh Police Department. One program streamlines the process for obtaining bicycle licenses at no cost to the customer, making it easier and more desirable to license a bicycle. The second program allows for private citizens to register their residential cameras to a database that can be quickly searched in the event of a crime or incident that takes place in the vicinity to obtain surveillance footage. For both projects, Officer Kopczyk spent countless hours of research, reaching out to other agencies, making presentations to the command staff, and working with IT to implement the rollout to citizens. Officer Kopczyk takes his uncommitted time to work on projects that result in the betterment of the department and the community. It gives me great pleasure to present Officer Thomas Kopczyk with the Team Policing Officer of the Year. Civilian of the Year, Office Administration Manager, Analyst Minu King. The Oshkosh Police Department is proud and honored to present Office Administration Manager, Analyst Minu King with the Civilian of the Year Award. Throughout 2020, MINU worked diligently in a support role to keep our operations running smoothly. In January, the city was the victim of a ransomware attack causing a long-lasting computer outage. MINU managed the crisis diligently, working at the Winnebago County Sheriff's Office with many from the support staff team, working through many daily crises and keeping morale up within her work group. Once the situation began to resolve, MINU led the administrative support staff team through the backlog. In addition to this situation, MINU is the expert manager of most new software programs at the department, such as our P1 records management system and ExecuTime. She readily understands the software programs and plays a major role in the implementation and maintenance of these programs within the department. Her expertise, knowledge, and understanding of these programs are used by other city departments and agencies to assist them with their issues. It is not unusual to find MINU on her laptop at home working on issues after hours and on weekends. It is a sincere pleasure to honor MINU King by presenting her with the 2020 Civilian of the Year Award. Her actions go above and beyond the duties of her job, reflect a deep commitment to the Oshkosh Police Department and the law enforcement profession, and are worthy of this formal recognition. Thank you for joining us virtually as we honor the officers, our civilians, and our community for the hard work that they performed in 2020, representing all the values that are important to us here at the Oshkosh Police Department. We appreciate each and every one of you, and we ask that if you see one of our officers on the street, that you thank them for the hard work that they performed in 2020, and they continue to perform day in and day out for the city of Oshkosh. Thank you very much.